When it comes to our tabletop role-playing games, we see that all is not fair in Love and War, specifically the combat. There is a sense of air quote fairness in the CR rating of 5th edition, where we try and pit a number of PCs against a monster, and that sort of works-ish. But at the end of the day, you typically have to figure out what is more balanced in your game, what things work, what things don't work, whether that be environmental hazards or role-play scenarios, or most typically just combat scenarios. My question for you all is, does balance matter in your game, or do you throw balance right out the window? Denny, kick things off.
All right. So I used to be a DM who was very focused on balance, and I'd spent years trying to crack what is this formula that is supposed to make combats either be irrelevant, easy, medium, or hard, or deathly. And I, for the life of me, could not find this code. And that's because there's no answer. There are the answers that are provided, but they're not helpful. So I strive for balance. That's what I try to do with my combat encounters. But do I achieve it? I doubt it. I have this theory of how to make combat encounters that I think equals balanced, and that's what I tend to do. You know, CR equal to the level of my characters. If I want to add more monsters, maybe I'll go a little under with CR. If I want to make it a bit more challenging, add more monsters of a little higher CR than the level. But it's not a perfect science, and it's incredibly hard to do. But I also find that this adds a lot of fun unpredictability that is still kind of balanced. And a lot of balance ends up having to be on the fly in the middle of a combat encounter. Take, for example, a recent combat encounter I ran that featured a puzzle by Mr. Wally DM here, where there was a bunch of will-o'-the-wisps, and I thought my players would be able to handle them. However, with a stray crit, one of my players went down, and I was like, I gotta fix this on the fly, otherwise we gotta TPK here. Which, I don't like to TPK if it's a irrelevant fight or not a big plot moment. So what I ended up doing was, if these things got a critical fail on an attack roll, I just had them fizzle out, and on initiative 20, another one would spawn in. So there was this element of stop these things from spawning, but also don't die. And then I boosted the encounter by this puzzle that was happening. If the players did not succeed at it, one of the wisps would upgrade to a ghost. But at this point, there was much less wisps, so there was a lot less danger, but it was a lot of moving elements, unpredictability, and I think that ended up balancing itself out. But yeah, no, I strive for the balance. It's hard to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, striving is all you can really hope for, right? A for effort.
Yeah.
Execution. I mean, it sounds like your execution actually sounded pretty cool there, but maybe your players maybe didn't like that as much. I don't know. we'll have to get the report on that one. Wally, balance? Yes, no, maybe so.
I don't really know, so I'm going to go with challenging matters to me. I'm kind of like an artificial intelligence. I'm going to start off with a few easy encounters, and I want to see how they react to it. How, even though they could have like a min-max build or something like that, but they don't know how to play the character in combat, or they don't know how to use those abilities, they're going to be less efficient. So I kind of want to start off with some easier challenges, and then kind of just take notes and see how they handle that. If they go through there without a problem, then next combat encounter, I'm going to know, and then I'll eventually get to that point where I'll feel confident enough that throughout the session where I want to put just like an easy encounter over here. This one over here is going to be a harder one, and I should be able to balance and challenge my players with no issues. So I don't leave a lot up to chance with encounters, but I like to err on the side of too easy rather than too hard where I can't fix it.
So you don't like creating harder problems for yourself. Got it.
Correct. I am a very lazy DM. I don't want to have to fix things if I can fix them in advance.
And speaking of Lazy DM, totally not sponsored, but Lazy DM definitely helps out in that regard. So check that out.
Absolutely.
Fred, balance, yes, no, possibly. Who cares? How we feeling?
Well, personally, balance I think is unachievable because I think the concept of trying to break down all the complexity of combat, monsters, all of the players' abilities, and the random nature of dice is impossible to equate into a formula that's mathematical. And my degree is in psychology and mathematics, by the way, people. So I'm not completely clueless in this area. The thing that you gotta have to understand is the concept of balance is a new thing, and I've talked with Wally about this before. It's actually relatively new. It's actually a product of Wizards of the Coast. They've been trying to sell this formula. CR rating is 5e. This is the current formula that they put out, which is completely useless to you, really. It's just it's a guide, which really means that you're out of luck unless you're sort of playing from level 1 to 4, and then there's going to be a bunch of monsters that throw that completely out because, gosh, the Banshee's really nasty, and Jackalwares are immune to damage unless you have a magical weapon or a silvered weapon. So, it's a little bit tricky. So the problem with Wizards of the Coast, since they've been doing this since 3.5, and trying to sell the concept of balance in games, is it confuses people. And before that, the concept of balance didn't really exist. You knew, okay, we're facing a beholder, and if you're playing basic Dungeons and Dragons or advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you're like, what do we do? The answer was you run away. There was not, oh, well, let's fight it. No, oh, look, we're going to run away. Okay, it's a dragon. Oh, really? Oh, shit, we're getting out of here. But new version of the game, very different sort of mentality. And so right now for 5e, they are selling two pieces of advice, or two bowls of soup. One bowl of soup says your game should be fair and balanced, and here's an equation that doesn't work in our book, in our Dungeon Master Guide, with a CR rating, which when we were doing the alpha play test, they never gave us, so we could never equate whether the monsters that we were testing for the alpha play test actually would marry up with the CR rating in the first place. Guess what, guys? Yes, I am in the book for the monster manual. So that doesn't mean anything, all of that. And then they're saying on the other side, oh, guess what? We left some stuff in the game that's like totally unbalanced, like Fireball, because it's iconic. It's so intrinsic to the game. That it's not the only thing they left in Dungeons and Dragons 5e that blows balance out of the water. So you're getting fed two bowls of soup, of which neither mix well together. So I don't really view it like balance. I know it's the new trendy thing to talk about, like game balance and fear, and I think for me, maybe it's because I'm 50, older generation and so forth. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe it's just me, and I'm just like, not the kind of person you want to be around when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know. But I don't think that balance is something that you need to worry too much about. In fact, if anything, an unbalanced game just means you play the game differently. And the problem with how you played the game differently, it means you actually have to think. You can't look at your character sheet because the answer's not there. You actually have to think, and you have to make hard choices. Like, there's a dragon. There's no way we can deal with that. We will have to go away and spend a week, and we might have to go and kill like a gazillion chickens to level ourselves up so we're strong enough to actually fight this thing, okay? And when we do fight it, we're going to have to make sure it's asleep. We can't use invisibility because it's going to see through our invisibility. So we're going to have to transform into something else, or we're going to have to wait until it's doing its business. It's going and having a poop or something like that, and catch it at a time when it's not going to notice that we're there. Or we'll wait for it to leave the lair, steal all its shit, and then when it comes back, we never had to fight it, but we got all the gold anyway. Thank you very much. It's a different way of playing the game, okay? It's not necessarily how people play the game nowadays. And I guess, to give you an idea, I use easy, hard, and deadly, and impossible combats in my games. I do that quite deliberately. I want people to have stuff that gives them the impression that they are capable of taking on anything. So they get the delusion that eventually they will come across encounters that they can always get through. That's not going to be the case because I'm going to do something very, very horrible. Taking the analogy of a pot with water in it and the method for working out what players can deal with. Every group is different because of the skill level and what the composition. So if you take a pot of water and if your group of players is the frog, and you stick the frog in the water and then you put the pot on the stove and start heating up the water, you just slowly introduce harder and harder and stuff until you finally find out where the frog will either cook or jump out of the water because it's too hot. So that's the analogy to testing how to deal with combat that I would have. And I can only describe combat encounters as more of an art form and a trial and error process than an actual equation. You'll find a tiny fraction of our community who believe that everybody else has no idea what they're talking about and doesn't know how to do it properly. And if you use the formulas right, you'll be able to figure it all out. Yeah, okay, sure. That's all I have to say.
Well, now my mouth's salivating because I want to eat some frog legs. So thanks a lot. I'll have to go figure out where I can get some of those later. For me, I am actually very good at once I DM for a group, I can figure out where the balance is. I can look and see, okay, because they're this scale level, because they play the game a certain way, because they have these classes, because they have these spells, because they have these features. I know a balanced encounter, but I don't care about balance, so I just eat it out the window. I think that balance is just, I think balance actually is a meta game in a sense, because if my players know every single time, without a shadow of a doubt, any encounter they get into ever has a fair tacked onto it, then they're going to approach it with a metagame. It's not, like, they may not say it out loud, they may not express it to each other, but it's there in the back of their minds. They know it. My players know that their characters are on thin ice. My players know that their characters could die if they say the wrong thing to the NPC, if they go to the Dragon's Lair when they're level 1. My players know that balance is not there, and thus they must do anything and everything in their power in order to not suffer a terrible fate. I think that it feels more organic in that sense. You can't be the level 1s that charge off to fight the Beholder. You can't be the level 4, nobodies that go up to the king and slap him, right? You can't do these things because I don't care about fair. Screw that. All is not fair in Love and War.
Craft. Love and Warcraft.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, like, I would not want to run a game where my players say, "Hey, there's a dragon, but we're too low level. Let's go kill 8,000 boars or whatever." I wouldn't want to run that game. But yeah, you did bring up the interesting point of older editions had a different mentality, and the reason for that is because of how you leveled up. That's a huge indicator on how we run the games. 5th edition in particular, we have this XP for monsters. And while it doesn't state anywhere as far as I can remember, usually people take that as you only get XP for killing the monsters. But that is not the case. You should get XP for overcoming the obstacle that the monsters represent. Whether that be you get around them, you talk to them and get them on your side, you get those monsters to fight the other monsters, you should get XP for that. Because guess what? If your game is only rewarded for XP for killing the monsters, your game's about killing monsters. Older editions, like you mentioned before with the dragon, killing that dragon is only going to get people killed and is going to be totally worthless. But stealing their gold is going to get you the XP. Well, so why get everybody killed going off to fight the dragon when you can just steal the gold, get all the XP, and get the heck out of there? That's a very important part of the balance of the game is what are the players are going to push to do? What are the players going to want out of the game? If you have XP for gold, then the balance of the game is, hey, there's monsters. Monsters are scary. Don't fight them. Like, only fight them if you absolutely have to, because it's worthless to fight them, right?
Yeah, I want to also say that, I kind of have painted a kind of a comical and terrifying picture of myself. But I can assure you that I'm always on the side of the players. you know, until I'm not on the side of the players, and that's usually when it matters. I don't care what they do with the monsters, frankly, in the end. But when they come up against the final challenge, my intention is I'm not looking at resource management. I build an encounter to take them out when they are at their strongest. And if they can figure out how to get through that, or they bug out and decide, oh, Fred's cooked it real tight now. There's no way we can deal with that. We'll come back and have a think about how to deal with that problem. I've considered that a win on their part. They have realised that the reality is that great stories don't come about by the special features that you have on your character sheet. They come about by the rather out of the box, out of the circle ideas and plans that come off, and a lot of them fail, but when they do work, oh my gosh, that's the thing you remember. I tell you, no other memory is really as important as, okay, you know the time that we actually managed to convince the dragon to go and attack another dragon, and once it had its fight and it was all injured, then we attacked it and took it down as it was limping back home, like that was the right time. But of course we emptied its lair before we did that, just in case we needed to bug out. And we had a plan because we had Dimension Door and Teleport. So if the thing decided to roast us and we looked like we're all going to die, we're just going to bamf out of there. You know, like we've got an escape route if we need to. That's a different way of playing the game. I think a lot of people don't think that way nowadays necessarily.
Absolutely. The balance of our game comes down to how our players approach the game, and also very importantly is how we deliver them the way to approach said game, right? Balance is an extremely important aspect to think about. Maybe not necessarily implement, but it's certainly something to think about, because no one's going to want to play in your game if there is no balance, and every single time at level 1, they have to go up against the Ancient Red Dragons. People are going to get real old. They're going to get real tired of that real quickly. So tell me all about it. Do you have balance in your games, or does balance not belong? Do you at least make an attempt? Do you think that there's a secret formula, or is the secret formula the friends that we made along the way and figuring out how to best manipulate them? Go ahead and tell me those things, because I would love to hear it. That is going to do it for us today. This was an absolutely outstanding performance by all my co-hosts here, and I'm going to try and tack on myself there, but I'm totally not conceited, so I'm not going to do that. Denny, go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself. Where can we find you?
Hi there, folks. I run a channel called Dicely D&D on YouTube, where you can find a series, if you don't already know how to play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And I also run a podcast speaking with other tabletop enthusiasts about several different topics, and I run a campaign on Twitch called Play Dicely.
You know, Play Dicely has a Dicely ring to it. Wally, go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself. Where we're going to find you.
Hey folks, Wally DM here. I am on YouTube at Wally DM, and I have a channel that focuses on traps and puzzles. And you can also find my book of puzzles, which is on DriveThruRPG bestseller. Be sure to check it out. And thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, it was both an honor and a privilege. And the next puzzle I want to see is figuring out. Fred, go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Fred Wheeler. I am a puzzle, and then you can't solve, unfortunately. Nobody has ever been able to solve my puzzle. Okay, so my name is Fred Wheeler. I run a YouTube channel called How to D&D, which covers everything for players and dungeon masters around playing the game. And I do some RPG stuff, but mostly it's Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, I am on Facebook and on Twitter. And yes, I do have a Twitch TV channel, but I don't use it. Just use YouTube. Thanks.
Well, YouTube sounds like the one-stop shop for the D&D train. So that has been us today. This was an absolute delight. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you to the amazing patrons who keep the lights on around here. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.